Okay, I want to just say hi and introduce myself. My name's Lauren Harris, and I'm a graphic designer in Portland, Oregon. And I had the pleasure of meeting Jacob Liberman about 10 years ago. At the time, I worked in a wonderful cafe on the island of Maui, and Jacob used to come in and have his cup of morning coffee. And I don't think we had said too much to each other, but one day I was making his coffee, and I noticed a specific spark in his eye, and I decided to ask him a question that had been brewing inside of me for quite some time. And I pulled him aside and I asked him what the word alchemy meant to him. And I don't even remember his exact words, but I just felt that this was a human being that I needed to know and needed to spend more time with, because he was so bright and present in his response. And from that day forward, I have attempted to spend as much time as I could and can with Jacob. His insights on life and vision continually inspire me, despite being in a different geography. So, yes, here we are.
Hi everyone, my name is Andre, and I have met Dr. Liberman just recently, January that is, as I was doing filming for an event that he appeared as a person who was invited to give a speech to speak to the audience. It's called One Dance Tribe, Conscious Dancing, and as I'm listening, I realized that I come to a rather quick conclusion that I would like to work with this man. And I do video production, and I'm thinking that of late I am mostly interested in producing people who have something to say according to what I consider that to be. And what Jacob has to offer is very real, without pretense, and yet very deep. And with that, a short introduction to what he does, I have a question, since I have been dabbing into the world of self-realization for quite some time. And I have a question here that is, why does one would need or feel the need to have a spiritual master sometimes in his life or her life? Isn't it that we have an internal master ourselves? Why looking for an external one, perhaps?
You know, that's a beautiful question, Andre. I don't think it's so much that we need a spiritual master or a spiritual teacher, but there's an interesting phenomenon that happens in life. We connect with people that we resonate with. And when I use the word resonate, I don't mean in some mystical way. I mean that the emotional parts of our brain literally are like an antenna that put out a field, and when those two fields are similar, those individuals attract. And when they come together, something very magnificent occurs. They don't know why they've been brought together. All of a sudden they find themselves in a discussion that seems to have erupted all on its own, seems to take them each on a journey. Often they find that they seem to disappear and the discussion has a life of its own. While they're not looking, each of their energy fields are affecting the other and literally making subtle adjustments in their physiology that brings them into a state of wellness. So the phenomenon of limbic resonance, what brings people together, results in something called limbic regulation. Our field, our energy field, what you might call our presence, love, whatever, so profoundly impacts the other that we regulate each other's physiology and we bring each other into a state of, thank God I'm home, if you will. So in response to your question, it's not so much the need for a teacher, it's just that when we fall in love, there's nothing you can do about it, and when you don't, there's nothing you can do about it. Occasionally you connect with a human being that something brings you together. And at times, that human being, since each of us in our own way are teachers of something, we're here to provide something, sometimes that individual is someone that knows something about life, which is the one thing most of us are not very successful at, even though we know how to make money and do all these other things. So for me, it's not a need for a teacher. There is a desireless desire within each of us for oneness. A few times in our life, we connect with someone or something where naturally that occurs without any effort. That's a match made in heaven. That, for me, is what creates this situation where, as you said, you have a master or you have a teacher. However, there's something much deeper than that, which is that both are teacher and both are student. It's just that in one moment, the voice of God is speaking through one of them, and the other one is playing the ear of God, and then it switches around, and the one that was the ear now becomes the mouth of God, and the other one becomes the ear of God. And we look at these things and we think, oh, one person knows, the other one doesn't. That's not at all what's going on. There's something much deeper than that. For this to really occur at the level at which you asked the question, both individuals must be the same height, which means that neither one sees themselves as a teacher or as a student. They've just fallen in love on some level, and then life takes them through a journey that provides both of them the ingredients that each of them need at that instance to take the next step in their life. I hope that answers the question.
I have a question that somewhat leads from that, Jacob. You speak of the ear and perhaps the mouthpiece of God, and I wonder about the eye of God. As I am growing up a little, I'm starting to recognize that we really all have come from different experiences and different backgrounds, and that we do see life through different lenses. And I wonder about the lenses that you see life with. What do you, perhaps this is a very general question, but when you look at life on a daily basis, what is it that you see? And you can interpret that in any way that comes through.
There's so many things that come through in response to that question. When you say, well, what do you see? Um, which me are you speaking about?
Mm.
Are you speaking about the me that everyone thinks they are, the physical body that has a head on the shoulders and two eyes through which we assume we see the world? Is that the me? Or is the real me the one that is invisible, that notices all the phenomenon occurring within the body, and allows you to recognize, for instance, when thought or worry is going on? Most of us believe that when we're worrying or whatever, we say, "Oh, I'm worried." We forget about the fact that the only reason we're aware that the worry is occurring is because something is observing it. That something is the source of the seeing. That is not me seeing. That is the source of life seeing. And so where does the seeing arise? It really depends whether you identify yourself locally, as physics would say, a physicist would call it. I am this body, this brain, these eyes, or my essence is this something that is formless, that is not quantifiable, that is uh, indescribable, and all it is a field of awareness that notices. That's the first piece. The second piece is, how do I see it?
Mm.
Well, I don't experience a lot of what you call thinking, or what most people call thinking, going on. Most people say, "Oh, we have free will, we have choices," and so on. And I imagine they experience this internal conversation going on. Should I do this? Should I do this? I don't actually experience that. And I haven't experienced anything like that for a very long time. What I experience is a guidance. Let me see if I can share what that guidance is. Because you often hear that someone is being guided or channeling some entity, or that they hear a voice. And from my experience, if you hear a voice, it isn't source. From my experience, and this is just my experience, all that the source is a field of non-physical eyes. It's a field of awareness, and all that it does is notice. It doesn't have a point of view. It doesn't have desire. It doesn't have will. All it does is notice. And so in that noticing, you could say there's a knowing without a knower. So what I notice in my life is something moves me in a certain direction. And at this stage of my life, I am just moved. There is no part of me that starts to think, should I or shouldn't I? It's choiceless rather than filled with choices. And so I don't know where I'm being guided. However, the result is that I find myself in the most magnificent situations, conversations, often with people I've never met before. And they are so touching that they themselves, it's like meeting with Andre's master, except they've entered my life, if you will, and it's almost like they become the master, they become the teacher, we get taken into some sort of a field. And one of the things that I've been finding myself saying is that my days seem to be filled with these little daily miracles. I don't know from where they arise. They just come all on their own. I think the importance of that is that we live in a world where we're all under the me from place to place. So I see it as an invitation. I see it. I see it. I can't even speak about it. I don't know. I see it perhaps in the way a child might see something, a very, very young child. I'm literally humbled by it. I'm often silenced by it. I'll give you a very quick example, just so we don't take up all the time.
Yeah.
Yesterday morning, someone that I'd met at a restaurant maybe a month before, just accidentally texts me and says, "Would you like to have tea or dinner?" And I said, "Sure." And we met in the evening, and we had the most magnificent conversation and interaction. It was as if we were both in a trance. Now, I don't know exactly what happened, and she kept saying to me, "Gee, I'm so glad you came. I know you're a busy man." And what came to me is, oh no, this is the most important thing in my life. You know, people talk about finding a state of enlightenment or meditating. My life is a meditation, and that experience last night was an instance of delightment.
Mm.
It was just so filling. I can't tell you how many times my eyes filled up with tears, and so did theirs. And I'm more than twice this person's age, but it was just like when you and I met, Lauren. There was some connection that spanned time and space, and even though we don't see each other very often, uh, there is no separation between us. That's what happens in my life each day. I keep seeing things that, wow, it keeps bringing me into a greater state of humility.
Mm. Thank you.
Anything else for you, Andre?
Well, I'm intently listening to something that is immediately recognized as I first meet you, or when I first hear you speak, and that is your French word, nonchalant way to speak about whatever the subject matter is, which is accompanied with a childlike discovery. Having now a 16-year-old, I remember the discovery that she goes through and in her life, and it is something that has that is actually lost after sometimes when we enter our professional careers, and there's not much room for the child anymore, in the sense that society does not really invite that aspect much. Of course, if you live on Maui, you might see more here than you might see elsewhere. But however, being in California over Christmas for a month, I could see how it is not really there in our lives much. So a question that comes to mind by hearing this, this is a state of heart and not a state of mind. how does one perhaps would invite that back in their lives to be childlike in the sense of allowing life to be rediscovered with a new set of eye?
Um, I'll respond to your question, and I'll also ask our viewers if they have any questions, which we're happy to address as well. Um, how do we bring that into our lives? By through grace. When we get touched, we get humbled. We become humbled. We become humbled by the enormity of this something that is always present, always there, but not something you can grab and control or hold on to or steer, if you will. And with the humility comes that childlike ability, that childlike way of seeing it, because when one is humble, authentic humility is based on the realization that we understand so very little about this miracle we called life. It isn't, there's so much of what we hear today of, oh, we create our own reality, I created my children, I did this, I did that. Unless you've traveled far enough in the road, you realize that that is just another dimension of the false identity of the me that has yet to realize that the me is not me. It's something beyond that. But for that to happen, the drop must fall into the ocean, at which point there is no drop, and all there is this incredible humility. That humility is what creates the space for that childlike quality you speak of to resurface. I don't know any way to make it happen. For me, it happened perhaps because something occurs in life that is so powerful that it silences you. And in that silence, you recognize that you're just a little feather in the wind of life. So for me, it is that process. For someone else, they might answer that question very differently.
No, thank you for that.
You're welcome. The exciting part of sharing with each other is that from the outside we assume that the person has themselves come up with a good question, and the other one has come up with a very good answer. Neither one of those is actually true. The question is literally breathed into the questioner. They are literally inspired, filled up with that question, because the intelligence of life has deemed that that question must be asked at this instance. And then that question that has been breathed into the questioner is then breathed into the other person and inspires them, and then all of a sudden that channel opens up, and the same source that asks the question answers the question. But we get confused. We think, oh, it's the person asking or answering, or aren't they so evolved that they came up with this response? Part of the awakening is you're just stunned by the enormity of this experience. You're just silenced by the miraculousness of it all. And you realize how little you as an entity know, and how infinitely wise this source of life is. And when we realize that that is speaking us, that that is answering through us, some part of us relaxes, just steps back, and just allows the process to occur, because at that moment of time we have no choice any longer. There is no chooser any longer. There just is life living itself through us. And so if we happen to be an apple tree, then all we do for the rest of our life is make beautiful apples.
Hmm.
Well,
Thank you, Jacob.
thank you both. It's been so much fun. We rarely have an opportunity to do this. I'm glad that we were able to inaugurate this conversation with the help of Joshua in the background here, the Wizard of Oz, to bring this forth. The purpose of this, just for our listeners, is that this time of my life, it feels like all that wants to occur through me, there's a part of me that just wants to plant seeds of goodness. Just like Johnny Appleseed supposedly planted apple trees, I feel like a continual opportunity throughout my day to help, to assist, to feel that wonderful place we've been trying to speak about, but that words cannot really describe. And so that feels like the focus of my life, and I would like as much as possible to take part in these interactive discussions with listeners throughout the world, or live audiences, um, so that we can begin to see the difference, um, to differentiate between our own direct experience and guidance and many of the theories and concepts and things that we hear and read about today. All of it is valuable, but at the end of the day, our own direct experience is all that really matters. That's what we know by heart.
Mm.
I want to thank both of you. I wanted to thank Joshua for putting this together, and I wanted to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Aloha.
Uh-huh.